Part 58. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 571. Then Li Qing walked to the middle of the left-hand side and knocked. This is the back door. The surrounding area is wrapped in metal, only this is poured with cement. Li Qing smiled mysteriously, and he had to thank the dead ghost Anbei Kenichi for this. When his subordinates were sorting out Anbei Kenichi's safe, they found the original architectural drawings of the Bank of Japan. This had to be said to be an unexpected surprise. So even if the vault door was closed just now, he was not panicked at all. Xiaoshan sneered, "You said there is? How can you still open it? With such a thick wall, if a C4 bomb is used in such a confined space, I am afraid that all the people in the vault will not be spared." Li Qing did not speak, but looked at his watch. After waiting for a while, there were bursts of roars from the wall. It was obvious that someone was outside using a wall-breaking engineering vehicle to chisel the wall. Xiaoshan's face changed when he heard the sound. He realized what Li Qing meant. The other two people had not appeared. It turned out that Aja and Xianzi were responsible for the allocation of vehicles and the wall-breaking work of engineering vehicles. Li Qing did not guess Shuxia Xiaoshan's trick, but he always had two plans for doing things. If he could enter the vault in a safe way, that would be the best. If he couldn't, he had to demolish it violently, but this method would easily attract the attention of the police. Okay. As expected of Li Qing, I admit defeat. In an instant, Shuxia Xiaoshan seemed to have his soul taken away, and looked at Li Qing in despair. For the plan in his mind, he even betrayed Kamita, with the purpose of bringing Li Qing in, but he didn't expect that Li Qing was still better in the end. Boom! The thick wall did not last long in front of the engineering wall-breaking vehicle, and a large hole more than one person high appeared directly. Aja and Xianzi, who were covered in dust outside, ran in quickly, finally got through. "Brother, are you okay?" Li Qing smiled and shook his head. "Let the brothers outside come in and get all these out." Time was urgent and there was no time to waste, and it was 5 minutes later than the expected time. The two nodded and quickly called on the younger brothers outside to hurry up and get the gold bricks out. Li Qing turned his head and looked at the hill under the tree with contempt. "Crow, send him to death." The hill under the tree pursed his lips tightly. He knew that he would die this time, and slowly closed his eyes. Crow raised the silencer pistol in his hand, and the bullet flew out of the muzzle, directly penetrating the entire head of the hill under the tree. The hill under the tree collapsed directly on the ground, and blood continued to flow out of the big hole behind his head. "Let's go." Li Qing took the lead to pass through the big hole and walked out, followed by Zhang Dongxiu, Crow, and others. After about 3 minutes, all the gold bars in the vault were moved, but there was no time to move the piles of US dollars. It was really because of the trick of the hill under the tree that the door of the vault was closed for a while, causing Li Qing to lose hundreds of millions of dollars in vain. But it was not a big deal. After all, the value of gold is much higher than that of US dollars. There was a faint sound of sirens in the distance. Li Qing knew that the Zairai police were about to arrive, so he ordered them to evacuate. More than a dozen vehicles were arranged to create various traffic accidents on the way to delay the police as much as possible. Several trucks loaded with gold bricks were heading to several different docks by different routes. Some ships exporting seafood were waiting at the docks, and they would set sail as soon as the gold bricks arrived. By the time the Zairai police came to their senses, I'm afraid these ships had already arrived in Java. "Brother, I roughly estimated that there are more than 100 tons of gold this time." Zhang Dongxiu hung up the phone and turned back to Li Qing. Li Qing shook off the cigarette ash, with a surprised expression on his face. "How much?" "More than 100 tons. Because he learned from Anbei Jianyi that Zairai donated about 10 tons of gold to Dongti, how could there be 90 tons out of thin air? According to the current market price, 1 ton of gold is approximately equal to 90 million US dollars, which means that this batch of gold is worth about 9 billion US dollars. Well, this is an estimate, the real value is much higher according to the estimation of his subordinates, the final value will reach 9.2 billion US dollars. Li Qing nodded, not bad, equivalent to 2 small oil fields. Speaking of small oil fields, Li Qing's heart is still uncomfortable. All personnel in this operation, the bonus will be doubled. After taking these unexpected gains this time, Li Qing was not stingy and asked to double the bonus for everyone. It is estimated that the bonus this time is enough for the younger brothers who participated in the operation to buy a house. The news was quickly passed on by Zhang Dongxiu on the intercom, and cheers came from the intercom. "Brother, I love you. Brother, long live. Brother Xiu, I will give birth to a baby for you. Brother Crow, treat us. All famous actresses tonight." Finally, a roar came from Crow, "Get out, I didn't say it." Then there was a burst of laughter in the intercom. Li Qing smiled and shook his head, and picked up the information next to his seat and read it. These materials are in the secret room, and Li Qing didn't have time to read them carefully in the vault. As time passed, Li Qing quickly flipped through the materials, but the expression on his face became more and more solemn. These materials directly linked everything Li Qing knew in the early stage. Damn it, the Pure Water project turned out to be a part of the manufacture of three-phase bombs, Li Qing gritted his teeth. It turns out that Xiao Rizai has been researching the advanced version of nuclear bombs, the three-phase bomb, since the 1980s. The three-phase bomb is a second-class nuclear weapon, also known as the hydrogen-uranium bomb, which is considered a type of hydrogen bomb, and has a higher energy density and explosive power. It can instantly destroy a large city, or even an entire island country, with a power 1,000 times greater than that of an atomic bomb. At this stage, only the United States and Russia have three-phase bombs in the world, and China may have them, but it is not clear. As the world police, the United States will never allow Xiao Rizai to have nuclear weapons. In the eyes of the United States, Xiao Rizai is like a castrated wolfhound, and it wants to use Xiao Rizai to stare at China. Tisk tisk, Fukushima nuclear power plant, Li Qing smiled when he saw this place. He vaguely heard of this name, as if there was a nuclear leak in the previous life. Xiao Rizai is using the Fukushima nuclear power plant as a cover to secretly make three-phase bombs. As long as the three-phase bomb is made, it can really stand up. Li Qing tapped the data. Damn, there is so much information. And he suspected that the leakage of the Fukushima nuclear power plant in the previous life was not the cause of the accident. Now it seems that it was caused by the failure of the three-phase bomb experiment. Li Qing raised his mouth and smiled. I wonder what the attitude of the father of the United States will be when he sees Xiao Rizai secretly researching the big killer this time. I am afraid he will crush Xiao Rizai to the ground. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 572. In Aoki Fang, in Li Qing's manor, the core members of the Aoki group were having an outdoor barbecue party. The latest news about the Bank of Japan robbery was broadcast on the outdoor large-screen display. Tokyo TV reported that the death toll in the Bank of Japan robbery has risen to 56, most of whom were Bank of Japan security personnel. There were almost no casualties among ordinary people. The robbers of the Bank of Japan robbery were well trained at this time and completed the robbery of the vault in a short time. It is estimated that the loss of the Bank of Japan this time will reach tens of billions of dollars. When the crow's eyes widened, he quickly swallowed the barbecue in his mouth. Brother, damn. How come there is an extra $1 billion? This group of people is too evil. We work so hard, and these dogs just talk and get $1 billion. Zhang Dongxiu, who was grilling meat, curled his lips. The Korean country is even more evil. You rob 100 million, and it dares to say that it loses 1 billion. Li Qing shook his head and smiled, these people have no bottom line. You can think of anything you can't do. Where is the ship? Brother, they will arrive at the Donggang Wharf of the autonomous province in a few hours, Aja whispered. Li Qing nodded when he heard it. Now there is really no problem. After all, the things have been shipped away. Who dares to say that he did it without evidence? Come on, let's raise our glasses together. Li Qing stood up and raised the white wine in the glass. New World Military Fortune Prosperity. New World Military Fortune Prosperity. Hundreds of elite brothers present raised their glasses, and the crowd looked at Li Qing with excitement and admiration, shouting in ecstasy. The voice resounded far away. Li Qing waved his hand and asked them to continue, while he sat down and enjoyed the lamb kidneys that Zhang Dongzhou specially roasted for him. Brother, should we go back to Hong Kong? Crow approached Li Qing and asked in a low voice. Well, I'll go back in a few days. I feel more at ease with my wife and children. Since knowing that Gang Shen was pregnant, Li Qing felt that where Gang Shen and his son were was home. Well, then I also. Before Crow finished speaking, Xianzi hurried to Li Qing's side. Brother, someone from the Public Security Investigation Department of the Ministry of Justice came to ask you about the Bank of Japan robbery case. Brother. Zhang Dongzhou and Crow stood up quickly when they heard it. Don't panic, what are you panicking about? Li Qing's eyes condensed when he heard it. If they are sure that I did it, the person who came would not be the Ministry of Justice but the Self-Defense Force. Then, I send him away, Xianzi asked carefully. This is Aoki Fang, let alone the Ministry of Justice, even if the Ministry of Foreign Affairs came, they can still ignore them. Xianzi, let him in. Li Qing nodded and sneered, since he is here, we have to meet him, otherwise it will seem that we are guilty. Xianzi bowed slightly and hurried out. After a while, Kenji came in with the Public Security Investigation Department of the Ministry of Justice. The leader was a middle-aged man in his early 40s, with slightly sparse hair on his head. Hello, Mr. Li Qing. I am Anbei Ono from the Public Security Investigation Department of the Ministry of Justice. As soon as Li Qing heard Anbei's surname, he knew that this person must be from the Anbei family. After looking at Ono, Li Qing did not speak, but pointed his finger to let him continue. Anbei Ono looked around and apologized with a smile, so you are having a party, how rude. Tell me, what do you want to see us for? Crow scolded impatiently. Please go back with us, Mr. Li Qing, to investigate. As soon as Anbei Ono's voice fell, all the younger brothers in the yard stood up with a swish and stared at the newcomers fiercely. Crow's eyes showed a hint of coldness, and his hand slowly touched the pistol at his waist. Zhang Dongzhou, wearing an apron, held the knife used to cut meat tightly in his hand, and a grim smile squeezed out of his face. This scene frightened all the civil servants except Ono, and they panicked and reached for their guns at their waists. Ask me to go back and investigate? Even the Minister of Justice of your Ministry of Justice dare not say this. To be honest, I admire your courage. Do you think that I dare not do anything to you because you are from Anbei? Li Qing put down the waist in his hand and slowly stood up, looking down at Anbei Ono, and patted Ono's face with his greasy hands. Believe it or not, even if I kill you here, the Anbei family will not dare to fart. The slap sound of the slap was not loud, but Anbei Ono's face immediately turned red and his fists were clenched tightly. But he dared not move. He knew the truth that Li Qing said, even if he killed him now, the other side would at most find someone to take the blame, and the Anbei family would not easily offend Li Qing for themselves. Li Qing looked at Anbei Xiao with contempt, took the wet wipes handed over by Zhang Dongzhou and wiped his hands. Sometimes you have to think twice before you act. If they are officials, you should also be an official. Don't rush forward foolishly. Why don't others dare to come? There are many fools who rely on their family's power to gain credit in any country. Sometimes he may not realize that he is being used as a gun. I'm sorry, sir. Anbei Xiao suddenly remembered the strange eyes of his colleagues when he came, and he realized that he was cheated now. I know the purpose of your coming, and this matter has nothing to do with us. We are eating barbecue and drinking wine. If you come to make trouble again, don't blame me for being rude. Li Qing didn't even bother to look at him, and waved his hand to let his younger brother make way. Anbei Xiao bowed again and left with his men. Brother, do you want to? Crow made a throat-wiping gesture. Use your brain. If you make trouble now, won't you attract their attention to us? Wait for a year or two. Li Qing glared at Crow. This kid is too reckless. Looking at the backs of Anbei Xiao and others, Li Qing whispered, it seems that I can't leave in a short time. The Ministry of Justice has already set its sights on him. Leaving now will make him a fugitive. He believes that as soon as he arrives at the airport, he will definitely be intercepted outside the airport. But now he is not worried at all. There is no physical evidence or witness. Xiao Rizai wants to control him, but the United States may not allow it. What's more, once the information in his hand is sent to William, the consequences, tisk tisk. Under the thunderous wrath of the father of the United States, I don't know if Xiao Rizai still has the energy to pay attention to him. The dog he raised is holding back a big move to bite the United States from behind. Thinking about Xiao Rizai's next situation, Li Qing wants to laugh. Maybe he can take the opportunity to get some wool. Since I can't go back in a short time, there is still something Li Qing needs to prepare. I haven't told my hometown about the East Tea matter yet. I originally wanted to go back to Hong Kong and take some time to meet with Brother Qi Gang and give him some materials in person. Now it seems that I still have to tell him as soon as possible. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 573. Small living cabinet, high-level meeting room. Shame. Look at which country's central bank has been looted. How is the security of the Bank of Japan done? Can't you hold on even for just 20 minutes? Prime Minister Kishida slapped the table so hard that the water glass on the table shook. What are the people at the Bank of Japan doing? Are they idiots? Kishida glanced around for a week, and no one in the huge conference room dared to speak. Ahem, Prime Minister Kishida, yesterday happened to be the funeral of former Bank of Japan Governor Kenichi Yasubu, so most of the senior officials went to see him off. Kato turned his eyes, coughed slightly and said. Kishida was even more angry after hearing this. Just because of a person's funeral, the top brass of the Bank of Japan dare to leave their posts without permission? These people deserve to die. In fact, Kishida himself knew that even if the top executives were all at the Bank of Japan, there would be nothing more than a few more corpses. There is no other way, now I have to catch them to block the gun, otherwise the doubts about myself will be even greater. Originally, because of the sanctions imposed by various countries last time, my approval rating dropped a lot this time. I am more likely to shirk responsibility because I have a group of backers. Kishida glanced at Kato and said, the Bank of Japan needs to be rectified. This matter will be handed over to Mr. Kato. I hope that you will enforce the law impartially and let those who left their posts without authorization this time receive the punishment they deserve. Kato was overjoyed when he heard this. The purpose of his voice was to pass the knife to the Prime Minister. It seemed that the Prime Minister was reciprocating the favor. Prime Minister, don't worry. I will definitely dig out all these moths. Kato immediately stood up and bowed. The Anbei family has been controlling the Bank of Japan over the years, and most of the top management of the Bank of Japan are people who are close to the Anbei family. He just took advantage of this opportunity to put some of his own people in and slowly take over the Japanese bank. Kishida glanced at him appreciatively and nodded. Any clues about the Bank of Japan robbery? For Kishida, this is the top priority. He needs to give an explanation to the people. The Minister of State stood up quickly, with a very ugly look on his face. Your Majesty Prime Minister, we have strengthened the police and started investigating, but so far we still have no clues. The Aokigumi's plan is very rigorous and basically involves every aspect, with some details taken into consideration. For example, the chassis numbers of all vehicles have been worn off, and the license plates are also fake. Everyone wears hoods and gloves when moving, without leaving any hair or fingerprints. All the surveillance along the route was damaged 1 hour before the move. Not to mention the police in their childhood, even if FO Bowl from the beautiful country came, they would not be able to find any clues. As for the physical evidence, it has long since been shipped out. Even though 100 tons of gold is a lot, it is unlikely to attract anyone's attention if it is scattered across several docks. Not to mention the witnesses, he wore a hood and Ultraman mask throughout the whole process, so even a kid would be able to spot a ghost. Therefore, the Minister of State was also helpless. It was the first time for him to see such a perfect multi-person crime. Asshole, it's been a day and you can't find any clues. Did these people appear and disappear out of thin air? Kishida knocked on the table and angrily accused the Minister of State. I'll give you 2 days. If there is no result, you can resign yourself. The Minister of State turned pale with fright, bowed repeatedly and said yes. Kishida was the only one yelling throughout the entire meeting. Calling it an emergency meeting, it was more like a meeting for Kishida to vent his emotions. At this time, Li Qing was holding an encrypted satellite phone and dialed the number of William, the Deputy Minister of Defense of the United States. Hey, Li Qing, does he have an oil field to take care of me this time? Did he also have an oil field in his childhood? By the way, Xiaozai wanted to list you as a terrorist organization some time ago, but we rejected it. How about that? Interesting enough. Before Li Qing could speak, William's hearty laughter came from the other side. The big oil field that Li Qing sent last time made him exposed at the highest level. Now news has come out that he is very likely to become the next Minister of Defense. The corner of Li Qing's mouth twitched when he heard the sound. This thief was so upset that he even opened his scars. But as soon as he thought about giving the news to William, his mood improved again. After a while, it was William's turn to feel heartbroken. I received an extremely confidential message. William, do you want it? Li Qing smiled and pretended. William's curious voice came from the phone. Ah. Is it about the beautiful country? Is there anything good about it? I accidentally investigated that I was secretly working on 3-phase bombs when I was young. Li Qing directly told William all about the 3-phase bomb plan that he had started since the 1990s. Wardfa. Is this true? William still didn't believe it. If Xiao Tian had done something, the intelligence department of the beautiful country should have known about it a long time ago. It's more real than pearls. How can I lie to you? I have all the information about the entire plan. Li Qing shook his head. It seems that beautiful country really doesn't know. He probably focused most of his energy on China and relaxed his supervision of his daily life. What a stupid little life, you actually play this trick on us. William gritted his teeth, not looking happy at all. Qing, I have a request. Can you give us a copy of the information? William requested. That's no problem, but I can't send it out now. Don't worry about this, our people will pick it up in half an hour, William said quickly. Oh well. Okay, it's decided. The United States said that of course the hometown should be informed, and there is also the matter of Dongti. Okay, Brother Li, I know all these things. As for the information, you don't need to find someone to send it over. Our people will come to you to pick it up in half an hour. Li Qing was completely numb. The Japanese's confidentiality level was good. They were infiltrated like a sieve, but the top secrets were not leaked. However, Li Qing thought about it carefully and understood. It was estimated that there were not many high-level infiltration personnel from China and the United States, and they could not receive the top secrets at all. Half an hour later, the people from both sides took away all the information one after another. Of course, Li Qing also kept a copy for himself, who knows when he can use it. For more than a month, Li Qing stayed at home in the manor peacefully, and asked Dong Xiu to grill meat from time to time. He did not fall behind in personal sports, especially the little girl Nanako, who basically occupied him whenever she was free, and Lily couldn't get close to him. It seems that she is determined to get pregnant. Li Qing thought that life would be uneventful as usual, but a call from Anbei Yingzi, no, Songzia Yingzi suddenly broke the peace. Yingzi, what did you say? You are pregnant. Li Qing was stunned at first, and then a little surprised when he heard the news. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 574. Well, calculating the time, it should be the night of the typhoon. Sakurako Matsushita said shyly, and she didn't expect that she would be entranced. Being a mother for the first time, she was still looking forward to it. Qing, what should we do now? Sakurako Matsushita was happy but also a little worried. If the Anbei family knew she was pregnant, they would definitely investigate. What should I do? Give birth. Stupid woman, Li Qing said with a smile. If Nanako knew about this, she would probably go crazy. She tried so hard but couldn't get pregnant, and she didn't expect that a woman with whom she had a romantic relationship would take the lead. After hearing Li Qing's answer, Matsushita Yingzi felt relieved and touched her belly. It seemed that the father of the baby in her belly still cherished it. Li Qing comforted Matsushita Yingzi for a few more words before reluctantly hanging up the phone. But after hanging up the phone, Li Qing scratched his head. He still had to think about this matter carefully. Suddenly a plan emerged in his mind, and after a moment of thinking, Li Qing temporarily decided on two plans, but it depends on the gender of the child in Yingzi's belly. If it's a girl, there's nothing to say. Just take Yingzi back to China. The rich daughter must be raised by her side. If it was a boy, the plan would be much more complicated, requiring a series of operations. He wants his son to enter the small life political arena using the Anbei family platform. Coupled with the resources in his hands, he will definitely be able to let his son sit on the throne of prime minister in the future. Although the son may have to bear the surname Anbei for the first half of his life, he can change it back at any time when he truly takes power. In addition, he also has to meet Matsushita Arita, the cheap father-in-law. Now the child in Sakurako's belly is the common bond between the two. At this time, Sakurako Matsushita was sitting on the sofa and touching her belly. She was also debating whether to tell her father about this. Creak, click, the door of the villa opened, awakening Sakurako Matsushita from deep thought. Father, are you back? Matsushita Yingzi stood up quickly. Matsushita Arita nodded with a smile. Baby girl, I will cook fish for you today. This is the sea fish I specially sent. Matsushita Arita felt that he owed his daughter too much, so during this period, he made food for Sakurako in various ways. Matsushita Sakura looked at her happy father and bit her lower lip, feeling hesitant in her heart. Matsushita Arita was stunned. He knew his daughter very well and asked directly, "What's wrong?" Sakurako. Matsushita Sakurako quickly pulled Matsushita Arita to sit down, her face became serious. Matsushita Arita was also startled by Sakurako's expression. What's going on? Father, I'm pregnant. Matsushita Arita was stunned for a moment after hearing this, then remained silent for a while, and asked expressionlessly, "Is it from Kenichi Anhoku?" Sakurako shook his head, and he felt relieved. As long as it was not Kenichi Anbei's, he didn't want his grandson to be without a father when he was born. Then he tried to ask, "Major shareholder?" Matsushita Sakura nodded shyly. "Asshole, you are so shameless and used me to coerce you. Don't worry Yingzi, I will make him pay the price." Matsushita Arita stood up angrily. As an old father, he would fight with his opponent no matter what he said regardless of his opponent's strength. "Father, I volunteer. I must let him, huh?" "What did you say?" Sakurako Matsushita Arita thought he heard wrongly. "I volunteer." Matsushita Yingzi's words immediately stopped him. "Ahem, at least, let me see him. This is too sudden." Sakura stroked her forehead, she felt it was too sudden. She had heard Li Qing say that among his women, only Dafang was pregnant, so they never brought balloons when they were together. Who would have thought that this time it would be so accurate and hit the target? "How about I ask?" Sakurako Matsushita whispered. Hurry, hurry! Matsushita Arita experienced the surprise just now, and now his heart is filled with the joy of having a grandson. At the urging of her old father, Yingzi dialed Li Qing's phone again. "Hello? Sakurako. What's wrong? Are you feeling uncomfortable? Do you want me to come over?" A series of words came from the phone, making Matsushita Yingzi feel Li Qing's concern for her. "Qing, my dad wants to see you." Li Qing paused for a moment. Just now he was thinking of meeting and chatting with Matsushita Arita, but he didn't expect him to have the same idea. "Oh? Okay, you guys stay at home, I'll go directly to your place." Now Matsushita Yingzi lives in her parents' house, and Li Qing also knows the specific location. After hanging up the phone, he directly called Zhang Dongzhou and Wu Yao to rush to Matsushita's villa. During this period, Matsushita Arita has been trying to ask Sakurako about the identity of the major shareholder, but Matsushita Sakurako has always laughed and said nothing. Matsushita Arita had no choice but to wait until the man arrived. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. Matsushita Yingzi stood up suddenly, jumped happily, and rushed to open the door first. Matsushita Arita shook his head when he saw his daughter being so childish. It seemed that his daughter was really stuck. "Qing, you're here." Yingzi opened the door, saw Li Qing, and threw herself into his arms. Just thinking about the product of two people in her belly makes her extremely happy. Li Qing quickly opened his hands to protect Yingzi, fearing that she would fall. After all, this was his second child. Ahem. Seeing the two hugging each other, Matsumoto Arita coughed slightly to express his presence. If it were an ordinary lousy son-in-law, he would probably consider the face of his future father-in-law, but Li Qing is a wild son-in-law, and Matsumoto Arita is also a cheap father-in-law. Li Qing didn't care about him at all, but was concerned about the safety of Matsushita Sakurako. "Sakurako, don't you introduce yourself?" Matsushita Arita glared at the unpromising girl and couldn't help but speak. "Qing, you come in first." Matsumoto Sakurako looked at her father embarrassedly and let Li Qing and others come in first. Li Qing and his group went straight in, especially when the big and strong Zhang Dongzhou walked in front of Matsumoto Arita. Matsumoto Arita had an ominous premonition. Zhang Dongzhou and Crow were not easy to mess with at first glance. Li Qing in front was very normal, but there was a faint momentum of keeping strangers away, which made Matsumoto Arita feel a little nervous. After everyone sat down, Sakurako introduced Matsumoto Arita. "Father, this is Li Qing." "Qing is my father." Li Qing smiled and looked at Matsumoto Arita, who was wearing glasses, thin and a little short. "Hello. Mr. Matsumoto, I am Li Qing." Matsumoto Arita sat on the sofa opposite and said in a pretentious manner, "Hello, I heard Sakurako mention you." He originally wanted to overwhelm Li Qing in momentum, and involuntarily put himself in the role of future father-in-law. Before, due to the strength of the Enbei family, he never took a posture. This time he wanted to give Li Qing a warning to prevent him from bullying his daughter in the future. Wait, what did he say his name just now? Matsumoto Arita suddenly remembered Li Qing's self-introduction and was a little stunned. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 575. Li Qing, it can't be, that Li Qing, right? Matsushita Arita's heart trembled, and he prayed that he wouldn't be the person he imagined. Ahem, nephew, what did you say your name was just now? Matsushita Arita thought he must have heard wrong. Maybe they have the same pronunciation but different words. Li Qing chuckled and glanced at Matsushita Arita. Li Qing. Muzi I Li, the green of the grass. Obviously, he also saw Matsushita Arita's intentions, but he didn't care at all about Matsushita Arita's opinion. None of his cheap bastards could eyeball him. Sometimes he even wondered whether he was destined to be at odds with his future father-in-law. Matsushita Arita's face still looked calm, but his heart trembled, and his hands couldn't help but clench the corners of his clothes. But in my heart, I felt like 10,000 grass and mud horses galloping past. My daughter has no choice but to look for this big devil. Oh, what a good name, Matsushita Arita said in his heart, but he didn't dare to show it on his face. Here, let's drink tea. He picked up the teacup to hide his inner shock. His daughter was simple and probably didn't know about Li Qing's deeds. As one of the small-time chaebol, Li Qing's reputation is so great that he even has to surrender some of his property to the Aokigumi. However, Matsushita Arita changed quickly. Since there are some things that you can't refuse, you can only enjoy them. Thinking again, Li Qing became his son-in-law, which is also a good thing for the Panasonic family. It will help the Panasonic group even more than Kenichi and Hoku. Li Qing didn't care at all about Matsushita Arita's little thoughts. He kept looking at Sakurako's belly. Matsushita Yingzi felt a little shy when she saw Li Qing staring at her belly. She patted him gently and said angrily, "What are you looking at? It's not as big as a soybean now." Li Qing raised his head and smiled, "What? I'm not even allowed to look at my cub." Matsushita Arita couldn't bear to see his daughter flirting with Li Qing in front of him. Ahem, a good son-in-law. Li Qing waved his hand, "You should call me Li Qing." Li Qing got goosebumps when he heard the word virtuous son-in-law. Matsushita Arita was as shameless as old man he. The smile on Matsushita Arita's face froze. Ahem, Li Qing, what do you think Sakura will do now? Of course Li Qing understood what he meant. In fact, Matsushita Arita was asking Sakurako what to do with the child in her belly. Tell me what you think. Li Qing took out the cigarette case unconsciously, but after looking at Yingzi, he put the cigarette back. Matsushita Arita actually had already made plans before anyone came, but now that he knew that the person in front of him was the legendary Li Qing, he was a little afraid to speak. Matsushita Arita pondered for a moment. As long as you support the Panasonic Group, half of the equity in my hands belongs to my granddaughter. Chi. Li Qing shook his head. This old guy had a beautiful idea. He already owned more than 20% of Panasonic's shares. It would be very easy to remove him. Seeing the disdainful expression on Li Qing's face, Matsushita Arita gritted his teeth and said directly, "Li Qing, is it possible to use the identity of the posthumous son of the Enbei family?" Before Matsushita Arita finished speaking, Li Qing's eyes flashed coldly and she stared at him. He felt as if his heart was being held by the other party, and even his breathing became rapid. Li Qing also had this idea, but he thought it was okay, but he wouldn't be happy if others said it, and he wouldn't do it for his father-in-law. The baby in Yingzi's belly is my son, Li Qing. If you dare to say such things again, I will shut you up forever. Only now did Matsushita Arita realize his mistake. A hero like Li Qing valued his children more than anyone else. Matsushita Yingzi also looked at her father with a horrified expression, subconsciously grabbing Li Qing's hand and leaning closer to him. When Li Qing saw Yingzi's reaction, he also gave up the idea of changing the situation and decided to keep her by his side, regardless of whether it was a boy or a girl. Seeing his daughter's expression, Matsushita Arita also knew that he had been misunderstood. Sakurako, I didn't mean that. What I mean is that when old Anbei finds out about this, he will definitely think that what is in his belly is the posthumous son of Kenichi Anbei. We still have to be careful. Matsushita Arita quickly changed his words. Li Qing waved his hand to interrupt Panasonic Oilfield. Don't mention this matter, I will solve the matter in Anbei. As for Panasonic Group, I will provide support. When the child is born, all the shares of Panasonic Group under my name will be transferred to the child's name. He had already planned to support Panasonic to become the largest plutocrat in Xyli, so that he would at least have a basic base in Xyli. Matsushita Arita glanced at Li Qing and nodded. Now he had no choice but to follow what Li Qing said. He believes that Panasonic Group will definitely reach a higher level with the help of Li Qing. But there are also risks. If Li Qing wants to swallow up the Panasonic Group, he will probably not even have any bones left. Fortunately, he has his own grandson, granddaughter, so Li Qing is not so crazy now. Ding ring ring. A phone call rang urgently, and Li Qing looked at the phone that was not his. Zhang Dongxiu, who was behind him, took out his satellite phone and looked at it, then whispered in Li Qing's ear, "Brother, it should be from the beautiful country." Li Qing frowned. It must be late at night in the beautiful country. He didn't know why William was so anxious to find him. Picking up the phone and standing up, he walked to the window. "Hello? William. Li, where are you now? Are you still in Tokyo?" William's tone was a little hurried, which made Li Qing even more curious. "Well, what's the matter? Tell the people next to you to move away, I have something to tell you," William whispered. Li Qing heard his serious look and waved his hand to let Crow and Zhang Dongxiu stay away. "Okay, talk. In 12 hours, there will be an accidental explosion at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. I suggest you leave Xyrizi first." Li Qing's hands trembled and he almost threw the satellite phone away. In terms of ruthlessness, it has to be the United States. This humming awesome place. "Remember, I didn't make this call," William said and hung up the phone without waiting for Li Qing to reply. Li Qing was shocked by this incident. Fukushima is about 400 kilometers away from Tokyo, and it should not threaten here. But nuclear radiation has a great impact on the fetus. Li Qing didn't want to take this risk. It has been more than a month since the Bank of Japan robbery. During this time, all the people sent by Xyrizi to monitor him have left. It should be okay to leave Xyrizi now. After hanging up the phone, Li Qing said calmly, "Yakurako, pack your luggage and stay at my place for a few days. There is a Chinese doctor at King Mufang, who can prescribe some pregnancy-maintaining medicine for you." Matsushita Sakurako was delighted and ran upstairs to pack her luggage, leaving Matsushita Arita, who was hesitant to speak. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 576. Haha, I'm just going to stay with me for a few days. Don't worry, Li Qing said to Matsushita Arita. The less people knew about what William said, the better. He didn't want to tell anyone about it, let alone his cheap father-in-law. "Yeah, I've also heard that Chinese medicine is very powerful," Matsushita Arita agreed with a smile. There was no doubt that Li Qing valued his offspring more than he imagined, and it was not unusual for him to do such a thing. After taking Matsushita Yingzi out, Li Qing whispered to Zhang Dongziu, "Dongziu, let me arrange a private jet. We will return to Xiangjiang in 2 hours." Zhang Dongziu nodded. He knew that his eldest brother must have something urgent, otherwise he would not leave in such a hurry. Matsushita Yingzi also heard Li Qing's words, with a hint of curiosity on her face. "Qing, are you saying you want to take me to China?" Li Qing hugged Yingzi and said, "Don't worry, Yingzi. I will always be with you." He can't tell Yingzi anything now. This matter is too relevant and he must not let any news out. A group of people hurried to the manor. Xianzi, Aja and others had already received news from Li Qing and had been waiting here. "Aja, Kenji. There is a batch of important goods from Bangsa country over there in Fukuoka. You can take some of your young men to pick them up." Li Qing had already made arrangements in the car, asking Li Zikan to ship new mobile phones to Xiali, so that he could find a reason to get Xianzi and Aja there. Although he was far away, he was still afraid that the backbone of his men would be damaged. Fukuoka is the farthest from Tommy's Hima in the southernmost part of Xiali, so there is absolutely no problem. The two of them did not doubt that he was there, and quickly gathered people. After all, they had to pay more attention to the matter that their eldest brother had personally explained and could not delay it. After sending the two of them away, Li Qing took his 3 women, Zhang Dongziu and Wu Wu, and headed straight to the airport. It wasn't until the private plane took off safely that Li Qing breathed a sigh of relief and felt relieved. At this time, Nanako and Lily kept staring at Sakurako. In fact, Nanako guessed from the beginning that the last time Li Qing went out in the middle of the night, it must be because of this woman. "Ahem, I'll introduce you to you. This is Matsushita Sakurako. You must get along well in the future. Sakurako is pregnant now, so you must be considerate of her." Li Qing coughed lightly and smiled. Lily's expression was normal, but Nanako looked at Sakurako's belly with her lips curled up as if she was about to cry. Obviously she has worked so hard, so let's forget about being the first one. After all, it's the big house. Unexpectedly, a married woman got on board first. Is her belly so unsatisfactory? Nanako suddenly stood up and sat next to Matsushita Sakurako. Sakurako was also startled by Nanako's actions. After all, she was the last to arrive, and she was afraid that she would meet sisters who were not easy to get along with. Unexpectedly, Nanako suddenly said in a low voice, "Ahem, Sister Sakurako, why are you so powerful? Can you tell me how you got pregnant and what position you used? Teach me well." The voice was very small, but Lily next to her heard it and rolled her eyes. "I knew it." But a pair of ears were twitching, for fear of missing a word. Nanako's words made Sakura blush. "There's no special gesture, just watching." After a while, the 3 women started laughing and whispering. Li Qing, who was sitting in the front row with Zhang Dongziu and Wu Wu, put down the poker in his hand and shook his head. "I was afraid that the 3 of them would fight, but I didn't expect that they would become familiar with each other so quickly in just a few words." Zhang Dongziu and Crow both started laughing along with Han Han. Zhang Dongsu is the only woman who doesn't have such troubles. The reason for the crow is that the brides changed so quickly that they didn't know each other. Basically, the 4 processes of meeting, bridal chamber, betrothal gift and divorce ended in one day. "By the way, how are the preparations for the villa in Xiangjiang?" Li Qing asked softly. He planned to move the 3 women to the newly purchased villa first, and try not to let Hong Kong students meet with them, lest Hong Kong students feel uncomfortable. The pregnant woman's emotions still need to be taken care of, and the 3 of them will still have to go back when the little day incident is over. "It's ready, brother. It's just over there in the mid-level villa area," Zhang Dongziu said quickly. Li Qing nodded. The 2 villas were not too far apart and he could take care of them. The plane arrived in Xiangjiang smoothly after several hours of flight. At the same time that Li Qing and others arrived in Xiangjiang, spies from the United States began to secretly sneak into the Fudeo nuclear power plant. A group of people were hiding secretly in the ventilation duct. The picture shows that the experimental base of the three-phase bomb is tens of meters underground of the nuclear power plant, although we don't know the specific location. But I think that as long as the Tomishima nuclear power plant is detonated, the underground experimental base will definitely be crushed underneath, and it may even cause a fatal explosion. The leader of the team this time is Tomohisa Komori, a spy who has been hidden in the beautiful country for many years. Tomohisa Komori is 48 years old. He was incited to rebel when he was studying in the United States in his early years. He now serves as the liaison officer of the United States Secret Agency in Japan. "Mr. Komori, we have to hurry up," a young man with blonde hair looked at his watch and warned in broken Japanese. Tomohisa Komori nodded. "My plan is to destroy the reactor cooling system of Unit 4. Once the cooling system is destroyed, the temperature inside the reactor will rise, causing the fuel core to melt, and zirconium to react with water vapor to produce a large amount of hydrogen. And then bomb." Tomohisa Komori spread his hands and made an explosion gesture. The others listened carefully, and one of them questioned, "Will this work?" "You know, they have a backup cooling system, which may be difficult to operate. So, we have to cut off the power supply of the nuclear power plant, or kill the operators." Xiaomori Tomohisa smiled sinisterly. The others looked at each other and nodded at the same time. Xiaomori Tomohisa was the only professional among the group, so they had to listen to him. "Mr. Xiaomori, how much time do we have to escape?" someone asked the most concerned question. They didn't want to die either. "Half an hour, we must reach Toshima Airport within half an hour. There is a special plane waiting for us there." Komori further explained, "Once an explosion occurs, the surrounding area will be covered with radiation. And the radiation will spread to other places with the air. If it cannot be effectively stopped, Tokyo may be affected. Think about Chernobyl, and you will know how terrible it is." Everyone shuddered. Chernobyl. The code name of this operation is Chernobyl. "Okay, let's start now. Remember to gather here on time at 5 p.m. This matter is very important to our beautiful country. Please do your best," Komori Tomohisa encouraged. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Banwanqing Bulletin Liang. Chapter 577. A commercial vehicle was speeding towards the Fukushima airport. In the commercial vehicle were all the personnel participating in the Chernobyl operation. "Drive faster, we are running out of time." Tomohisa Komori looked at his watch and said loudly. The plan still had an accident. One of the team members was accidentally discovered by the personnel of the Fukushima nuclear power plant. They had no choice but to kill some of the people who discovered them. A lot of time was wasted, and they could only pray that the plane would not take off so early. According to the original time, it would definitely be too late now. Fortunately, the destruction plan was successfully completed. It is expected to explode in more than 10 minutes, and the nuclear radiation inside will leak. At Tomohisa Komori's urging, the commercial vehicle made an overwhelmed roar, and instantly exceeded 180 miles, rushing towards the airport. It was not until more than 10 minutes later that the action team boarded the plane safely and flew into the sky, and Tomohisa Komori was relieved. "Come on, cheers for the success of our operation." Tomohisa Komori raised the red wine in the glass and said happily, "Cheers. After this job, you can retire. After this job, they can settle down in the United States forever, and they will be received as heroes by the United States." Boom! The loud noise on the ground was heard by the action team members on the plane, and they looked at the ground through the window one by one. On the ground, the fire was everywhere in the Fukushima nuclear power plant, and the explosions were endless. It seemed that it was not only the number 4 unit, but also the other units that were caused by the explosion. They all fell silent. After all, most of them were ordinary people, and there was still an indescribable feeling in their hearts. It can't be said that they felt guilty, but perhaps a little sympathy for the innocent victims. Just as several people were drinking silently, the sky, which had already darkened, suddenly became as bright as day, which made several people feel extremely dazzling. Then there was a deafening noise, and the plane began to shake. After waiting for the plane to stabilize, several people ran to the window again and looked down, and saw a huge mushroom cloud slowly rising on the ground. Actually they are researching three-phase bombs. Tomohisa Komoru was shocked. After all, when his boss explained the plan, he only said it was very likely. Even if it was very likely, according to the nature of the United States, they would resolutely implement the Chernobyl plan. Now all members of the action team were relieved, and the trace of guilt in their hearts instantly dissipated. If Xiao Ri really developed a three-phase bomb, I don't know how many people would be killed. We can be regarded as eliminating harm for the people, right? Well, Xiao Ri slaughtered so many people during World War II, this is their retribution. Hee, now there is no evidence, everything has turned to ashes. Drink, cheers. But unexpectedly, the plane tilted again, and the red wine in the glass instantly spilled on their lapels, like blood. Asshole, what's going on? Tomohisa Komoru walked into the cockpit of the plane angrily. I saw a big hole in the temple of the pilot in the cockpit, blood mixed with brain matter kept flowing out, and there was a pistol in his hanging hand. The instrument dial above was bursting with sparks, it seemed that the pilot had planned it in advance. He understood everything. The United States would never let this leak out, so they had to die. He looked at the flames rising from the rear cabin in despair. The United States had no chance of survival for them. Then the plane fell rapidly, and the flames that kept coming out engulfed all the members of the action team. A minute later, the fragments of the plane that had disintegrated in the air fell into the Pacific Ocean and sank to the bottom of the sea. All evidence disappeared. The Fukushima nuclear power plant on the ground had been razed to the ground by the three-phase bomb in the experimental stage. Everything was vaporized in an instant, and even the gravel on the ground had turned into glass-like crystals. This explosion was more powerful than the Fat Man and Little Boy in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Not only the shock wave and air wave, but also the range of infrared and radioactive radiation rain was very large, which would definitely affect Tokyo. The radiation of a normal three-phase bomb decays very quickly. The key is that this one is just an experiment, and the duration of nuclear radiation will only be longer than that of an atomic bomb. Kishida, who was working in Congress, felt the window shaking, but he still signed the document as usual. There are several earthquakes in Zaozai every year, and all Zaozai people are used to it. Alas, God doesn't bless Zaozai. It would have been great if we could have taken over China. The land there is so coveted. Kishida kept his hands busy and muttered to himself. He did not agree with the decision of his father's generation. He said that he should stop when he was ahead after occupying Manchuria and take things slowly. At least he doesn't have to worry like he does now. If there is a big earthquake, a tsunami, or an eruption of Mount Fuji, there is no place to hide. 5 minutes later, he stood up and stretched his muscles. Bang! The door of his office was suddenly pushed open. Before he could scold the person who came, he heard his secretary shouting, "It's bad, Prime Minister. Fukushima nuclear power plant exploded." What? Fukushima nuclear power plant suddenly exploded. Kishida looked at the sweaty secretary in astonishment, his face full of disbelief. The vibration just now was not an earthquake, but a shock wave, the secretary explained a little helplessly. Bullshit, even if 10 nuclear power plants exploded it wouldn't affect the East. Kishida stopped talking suddenly before he finished. He suddenly remembered the secret experimental base underneath the Fukushima nuclear power plant. No. Impossible. Kishida's face turned pale when he thought of this, and he murmured subconsciously. Your Majesty Prime Minister, it's not just nuclear power plants, it may be, underground, Your Majesty Prime Minister. The stimulation was so great that Kishida fainted. Not only him, but people in the entire affected surrounding cities fell into panic. Some people whose ancestral home is Nagasaki and Hiroshima feel the pain of their parents again. With the efforts of his secretary and others, Kishida slowly opened his eyes. Where is this? I had a dream. I dreamed that the Tomishima nuclear power plant exploded. Ahem, fortunately, it was just a dream. Prime Minister, are you awake? The secretary looked at Kishida nervously, fearing that he would faint again and that he would have to make decisions on many things to come. After finally helping the Prime Minister to his seat and pouring him a glass of water, the secretary said quietly, Prime Minister, this is not a dream, the Fukushima nuclear power plant really exploded. Paji. The water glass in Kishida's hand fell to the ground. Isn't this a dream? No. Hey, Prime Minister, don't be dizzy. You still have to make up your mind next. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 578. Rain, black rain keeps falling from the sky to the ground, splashing water everywhere. People in Nagasaki and Hiroshima who have suffered hardships know the horror of this kind of rain. A large amount of radioactive substances mixed in the rainfall on people's bodies, and people's bodies will have radiation sickness reactions in a short time. The nearest small town to Toshima, Iwaki City, is like a ghost den. No one dares to come out under the black rain. The black rain came very quickly, and these people had no time to escape and could only hide in the house. But their fate has been determined. The radioactive substances scattered in the air will radiate them anytime and anywhere, and their final outcome will be disease and death. Zairizi was once again hurt by the nuclear explosion, which shocked the whole world, and kind people began to sympathize with Zairizi. However, after symbolically providing material assistance to Zairizi, the three permanent members of the unexpressed doubts about the nuclear explosion. According to Russian nuclear expert Krasky, they have experienced the Chernobyl nuclear power plant leak. After a detailed comparison, he believes that the nuclear power plant explosion alone would not have such a great power. The shock wave that can reach 20 kilometers away must be a standard nuclear weapon, most likely a second-class nuclear weapon. Relevant experts from the United States also pointed out that this explosion did not seem to be a sudden incident, but rather a result of a failed nuclear weapon experiment. They remain skeptical about this nuclear explosion. Chinese nuclear experts followed closely and said that according to various detailed data, the explosion equivalent is equivalent to 50 million tons of TNT explosives. It is impossible for it to be just a nuclear power plant explosion. It has far exceeded the explosion equivalent of an atomic bomb. Now the entire Zaire government not only has to clean up the mess it has caused, but also has to be suspected and accused by the three permanent members. But it is impossible to admit it. At most, it can use the suffering masses to play the emotional card. The idea is good, but the United States wants to hurt him thoroughly. The person in charge of the Zaire three-phase bomb project suddenly fled to the United States to apply for asylum. The self-explosion of the Zairizi three-phase bomb project in the media of the United States shocked the people of the world. Now most people think that Zairizi has caused such a situation by himself. Even the international aid materials have been reduced a lot. Assholes, why are they like this? Just because we are working on three-phase bombs, they won't help us? What's the reason? Kishida slammed the table in exasperation. In order to clean up the mess these days, he almost didn't sleep at all, and has been trying to get support from all parties. Never expected that the three people on the upper side would fire at him at the same time, questioning Zairizi's private research on three-phase bombs. Damn, they all have three-phase bombs in their hands, so they don't allow others to study? Only the state officials are allowed to set fires, but the people are not allowed to light lamps. Is there still justice? Is there still fairness? Kishida slammed the table angrily. His palms have become thicker because of slamming the table these days. The high-ranking officials in the conference room were silent. Now Kishida cannot shirk his responsibility. It is estimated that the day of his resignation as Prime Minister is not far away. How are the casualties? How is the logistics support? The grave is safe, and a lot of vaporization. Most of the injured are caused by thermal radiation, and some are injured by shock waves. But Kishida glared at the reporter, but what can't be said at this time? But the city close to Toshima has begun to rain black rain, and it is estimated that the radiation sickness will be very serious in the next stage. Kishida took a deep breath. This time he really shot himself in the foot. It is equivalent to a nuclear explosion in a city. This time is even more serious than Nagasaki and Hiroshima. In terms of logistics support, international support has decreased, and we are a bit stretched, the Minister of Logistics and Support whispered. Then buy it? I don't believe we can't buy it, Kishida said angrily. Now it is the father of the United States who takes the lead in reducing support for him, and European countries follow suit and reduce it? It happened suddenly, and coupled with the Bank of Japan robbery, our US dollar and gold reserves are insufficient. Also, our Zairize has a bad reputation internationally for some time, and it is difficult to buy, the Minister of Logistics and Support said, a little aggrieved. The last time the country exchange plan was exposed, Zairize was like a rat crossing the street, and everyone shouted and beat it in the neighboring countries. This time it happened again. The world's impression of Zairize has reached an extreme, and now it is probably comparable to the YT people. Kishida pinched his eyebrows. For the first time, he felt that the position of Prime Minister was too difficult to sit. In this way, the Ministry of Fisheries will sell some seafood that has been frozen all year round to the Chinese at a low price. They love to take advantage of small bargains the most, which is equivalent to clearing inventory. Kishida suddenly had an idea and thought of a good idea. Originally, these were strategic reserves, and now they were just right to sell them in exchange for some food. The Minister of Fisheries stood up with an embarrassed look on his face. I haven't reported to you yet. China has just issued a notice saying that for the health of the Chinese people, all seafood from Zairize is prohibited from entering China. Not only China, but also Mao, Java, Luzon, all refuse to import any seafood from Zairize. There was a nuclear radiation from Mao the next day, this group. This incident directly broke Kishida's defense, and he cursed without regard for his manners. After venting, Kishida sat down in a chair dejectedly. Borrow money from the Chaebol, let's get through this difficult time first. Prime Minister, no, in that case, we will be controlled by the Chaebol like South Korea. Kishida glanced at him. Do you have any other ideas? Can you let China send us food for free, or can you let people all over the world treat this as if it never happened? There is one thing I didn't tell you. Now the Japanese have begun to be driven out of the coffee country. Now a large number of Japanese have returned to their country, and we will be under greater pressure in the future. The meeting room was silent, and the atmosphere was extremely depressing. For the first time, they felt the powerlessness of their fathers after the defeat. Okay, go down and make arrangements. After the arrangements are made, I will talk to the Chaebols in person. Kishida waved his hand weakly, indicating that the meeting was adjourned. Hong Kong, a villa in the middle of the mountains. Li Qing was watching TV in the living room. The TV reported the explosion of the Toshima nuclear power plant. The reason given on TV made Li Qing, who knew the inside story, want to laugh a little. The report said that the power was suddenly interrupted, and the backup power supply had a system error, which caused the cooling system to fail, and the core to overheat, so that an explosion occurred. The experts on TV also said it in detail, but they could only fool ordinary people. However, what Li Qing did not expect was that the United States really detonated the three-phase bomb that Xiaorizai was testing. This made Li Qing once again witness the cruelty of the United States, and at the same time, he became alert. He and the United States are now in a honeymoon period. What will happen in the future? No one can predict. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 579. Li Qing sat on the sofa and stroked his forehead. He always worked hard to expand in the past, but now that the entire New World has become a world-class organization, there have been more troubles. Especially when it comes to the game between big powers, he has more and more things to worry about. Instead, he now envied the young and dangerous Li Qing, who once led his younger brothers to collect protection fees and worked hard to climb up the ladder. What's going on? Are you feeling uncomfortable? Hong Kong Sheng saw his man stroking his forehead and thought he was feeling uncomfortable, so he quickly sat next to him and asked with concern. Li Qing looked at Hong Kong Sheng's slightly bulging belly with a smile. No, I'm just a little tired. I heard that you went to Sakurako and Nanako's place. Early in the morning, Hong Kong students took a shui to buy some daily necessities and supplements, and then went to a villa not far from here. They didn't come back until almost noon. Well, let's go see Sister Yingzi. After all, she is pregnant. Hong Kong Sheng smiled softly, with a slightly aristocratic temperament. Li Qing was very pleased to see what Hong Kong students did. After all, everything was going well for the family, and having a well-informed wife at home was more important than anything else. He said to Hong Kong students with some guilt, I have wronged you. Hong Kong Sheng slapped him angrily. What's wrong with this? It's just for the sake of our old Li family. She also knew that her man had always wanted to have more children, and now that she had taken the lead, the baby in her belly was destined to be Li Qing's eldest son. It is said that a woman looks after her husband in the first half of her life, and her son in the second half of her life. Now that the child has not been born, she will start to pave the way for a baby in her belly. Who is Li Qing? Of course he knows what Hong Kong Sheng is thinking, but he doesn't stop him. In his heart, he, the eldest son, is destined to inherit part of his inheritance. Hong Kong Sheng gently leaned into Li Qing's arms and blew his breath like orchids, making Li Qing's nose itchy with his hair. By the way, Brother Cheng, go and see Mr. Huo when you have time. I heard that his condition is not very good. As Li Qing's eldest daughter, Hong Kong Sheng often had ladies from the top circles in Hong Kong come to visit her. She learned the news from these people. Li Qing stiffened when he heard this. He just came back yesterday and he planned to visit tomorrow. Dongxiu, call the crow, we will go to Huo's hometown later. Since such words are spreading in the circle, it means that Mr. Huo has indeed reached the point where his fuel is exhausted. Hong Kong Sheng looked at the solemn expression on Li Qing's face and comforted him softly. Alas, birth, old age, illness, and death are natural laws, and no one can stop them. Li Qing patted the Hong Kong student's hand, nodded and said nothing. Although everyone knows it, no one can let it go. Li Qing went to the Huo family manor this time without notifying the Huo family in advance. The eldest son of the Huo family heard the guard's report and knew that he was coming, so he immediately greeted him at the door of the villa. As soon as Li Qing got out of the car, Huo's son hurriedly walked forward. Mr. Li. Li Qing waved his hand to tell him not to be polite, and complained slightly, how is Mr. Huo? Why didn't you tell me in advance? As far as Li Qing knew, Mr. Huo had been lying in bed for several weeks. Mr. Li, the old man, he won't let you talk to him. Huo's eldest son looked embarrassed. Li Qing sighed secretly. He had more than enough to defend, but not enough to develop. He stopped talking and walked directly into the villa, following the footsteps of Huo's eldest son. Entering Mr. Huo's room, Li Qing smelled a strong smell of disinfectant. The family members and doctors who had just entered the outer room stood up and said hello to Li Qing one by one. Li Qing's face was blank. He had no time to pay attention to them now and walked directly into the inner room by himself. Mr. Huo was lying on the bed skinny. He was very happy when he saw Li Qing walking in the door. He struggled to straighten up, sat on the bed, and waved to Li Qing. Li Qing hurried forward and took a few steps, showing an ugly smile. "Mr. Huo, don't move, I'm coming." Huo Lao used his withered arms to prop up his body to make himself look more energetic. "Little friend, weren't you in your childhood? When did you come? Why didn't you inform me in advance? They gave me a big grouper last time, and I'm keeping it for you." Mr. Huo spoke more coherently than last time, but Li Qing was not happy at all, but instead became more worried. He could only force a smile and said, "Haha, Mr. Huo, I don't miss you anymore. I came here specifically to see you." After hearing Li Qing's words, Mr. Huo also laughed. "Haha, ahem, you kid, I'm not a woman, and you still come to coax me with these words. Okay, it's not a waste of time for you and me to meet each other." Li Qing also chuckled. "Mr. Huo, let me tell you about the recent events. It's quite interesting." Okay, I'm all ears. I want to see what shocking thing your kid has done." Mr. Huo tried his best to raise his arm and nodded to Li Qing. It was obvious that he didn't know about the explosion at the Fukushima nuclear power plant in his childhood. "I discovered the Yehui when I was little." Li Qing vividly described what he had done during this period, and Mr. Huo also followed his story, his mood constantly rising and falling. We talked like this for more than an hour, one talking and the other listening. It wasn't until Li Qing finished speaking that Mr. Huo burst into laughter, and then coughed violently. The doctor and the descendants of the Huo family rushed in, but Mr. Huo scolded them and left. Okay, I slaughtered so many of us in my childhood, and my little friend's actions can be regarded as earning some interest on them. It's a pity that it was done with the help of the beautiful country." Mr. Huo calmed down his cough, panted for a while, and said slowly, "The days are still long. If you keep watching slowly, you might even be able to see Mount Fuji erupt," Li Qing said with a smile. Huo Lao looked at Li Qing with a smile. "Little friend, don't lie to me. I know my own body. It's a pity, I can't see the Chinese Olympics anymore." Li Qing couldn't help but hold his skinny hand. "Mr. Huo, don't say that, medicine is so advanced now. I have some abilities over there in the beautiful country, and I heard that a drug is being studied there, which is specifically for this disease." In fact, Li Qing had already inquired about the drug being tested in the beautiful country, but the experimental results on humans were not very satisfactory, and there were also severe side effects. Mr. Huo patted Li Qing's hand, his face a little pale. "Little friend, forget it, I have to go through this life, and I can survive until now. If I can be useful to the country, my life will not be in vain." Seeing the sadness on Li Qing's face, Mr. Huo said wisely, "God has treated me well, and Mr. Lin allowed me to have you as my friend. If you miss me one day, just bring some cigarettes and wine to talk to me. Old man, I'm just taking the first step." Li Qing forced a grin and said, "Me too, don't worry. Nothing will happen to the Huo family, I will be with you in everything." He didn't know what to say. Only saying this could make Mr. Huo feel at ease. Mr. Huo smiled and nodded. "Thank you very much, little friend. I will have to trouble you to take care of these useless descendants of the Huo family." The only thing he couldn't worry about now was the descendants of the Huo family. With Li Xiao taking care of them, at least nothing big would go wrong. It wasn't until another half hour passed that Li Qing saw the tired look on Mr. Huo's face that he said goodbye. Li Qing walked out of the inner room, and the descendants of the Huo family quickly stood up. If anything happens to Mr. Huo, please inform me as soon as possible. Huo's eldest son nodded quickly. Well, okay Mr. Li. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 580. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, Huo's manor. In the inner room of Mr. Huo, the eldest son of the Huo family was wiping Mr. Huo's forehead with a towel soaked in warm water. Mr. Huo was pale, lying on the bed, with beads of sweat on his forehead, and his breathing was also weak. Mr. Huo raised his hand tremblingly. What time is it now? Father, it's past 3 in the morning. Do you want to drink some water? Mr. Huo shook his head. Wake me up and call them all in. Soon, all the descendants of the Huo family surrounded the bed. Mr. Huo looked around and smiled with difficulty. Okay, okay, the Huo family will rely on you in the future. Father. Grandpa. Some people began to sob. Since ancient times, who has not died? Don't act like a daughter, now I will tell you. The whole inner room was quiet, and a group of people held back their grief and listened to Mr. Huo's speech. In fact, I have already written the will, and it will be announced by Lawyer Wang after my death. Mr. Huo nodded to Lawyer Wang standing outside the door. After I die, the eldest son must continue to support the development of national sports, and the second and third sons will continue to do business. You two can discuss anything with the eldest son. I can't take care of the affairs of my grandchildren so far. You can decide for yourself whether they go into politics or business. Mr. Huo panted a few times, and the atmosphere in the whole inner room fell silent. I have known Li Qing for many years, and I have asked him for help before. If the Huo family has any undecided matters in the future, you can ask him. He will help you at any time for my sake. But remember not to bother you with trivial matters. I know, Father. You take a break. The eldest son of the Huo family couldn't help but say as he looked at Mr. Huo's difficult breathing. Let me finish, I'm afraid I won't have another chance if I don't. If you want to benefit the country, you should live and die for it. I have made many friends over the years, but few of them share the same ideals with me. Li Xiao is the greatest legacy I left for you. I hope you respect him as much as you respect me. He has a pure heart like me. Old Huo groaned in pain. The country has just risen, it's a pity. If I could live a few more years, maybe. Give Li Xiao a message, saying, Old Huo is gone. After saying this, Old Huo slowly lay down and fell asleep again. The whole Huo family manor was filled with sad cries. In the dark night, Li Qing picked up the phone and yelled, What did you say? The Hongsheng next to him shivered in fear, rubbed his eyes, stood up and looked at Li Qing with concern. Li Qing slowly put down the phone, leaned his whole body against the back of the chair on the bed, and tears flashed in his eyes. Gangsheng shook his arm in worry. Li Qing smiled unkindly and patted Gangsheng's hand. Mr. Huo passed away. Although Gangsheng had expected it, he was still surprised when he heard it. You are pregnant and it is inconvenient for you to come. I will call Hemin and ask her to come. Due to his relationship with Mr. Huo, the female family members must be comforted by someone. Now that Gangsheng is pregnant, Hemin has to come. Gangsheng can understand and nodded in agreement. You rest first, I'll go to the Huo family. Li Qing comforted Gangsheng, put on his clothes and hurried to the Huo family manor. He didn't expect it to be so fast. Mr. Huo was chatting with him during the day, but he didn't expect that he would be separated from him in a few hours. When he arrived at the Huo family manor, the mourning clothes had been hung inside, and Mr. Huo's body had not been sent to the funeral home. The crying in the manor was one after another. The pillar of the Huo family fell, and the backbone was gone. Li Qing walked into the Huo family manor with a sad face. "Mr. Li, my father is here." The eldest son of the Huo family had tears on his face. Li Qing nodded and walked into the inner room. There was a white cloth covering Mr. Huo on the bed. Li Qing trembled and walked forward to lift the cloth. Mr. Huo was already fully dressed, and his face was already ashen. "Mr. Huo." Li Qing's voice was a little choked. Mr. Huo was both an elder and a good friend to him. They met when he was in a humble position and helped him a lot. They were also close comrades in arms. During the Financial Defense War, the two risked bankruptcy to protect Hong Kong. He also helped Li Qing to get in touch with his hometown. It was not wrong to say that he was a noble person in Li Qing's life. Li Qing gently put down the white cloth, and then bowed deeply to Mr. Huo's body. "Mr. Huo, have a good journey. Another red businessman has passed away in China." From the Huo family manor to the funeral home, Li Qing followed all the way. Like the Huo family, he had not closed his eyes since 4 in the morning. "Mr. Li, please go back and have a rest," the eldest son of the Huo family whispered. Li Qing shook his head. With Mr. Huo gone, the Huo group would definitely be in turmoil, and some restless people would start to make trouble. "Crow, move a chair over here." Li Qing sat directly at the door of the morning hall. He wanted everyone to know that Mr. Huo was gone, and there were still people supporting the Huo family. Who dares not to have eyes, then come and try. At around 7 o'clock in the morning, people who received the news and came to pay their respects came one after another. But when they saw Li Qing at the door of the morning hall, they all shuddered in their hearts. It's rumored throughout Hong Kong that Mr. Huo and Mr. Li are close friends regardless of age, and it seems to be true. Tisk tisk, Mr. Li is here to take charge. Alas, I envy the Huo family so much. With such a great god in charge, no one dares to offend them. The group of people rushed to the morning hall and stopped talking. At the same time, they greeted Li Qing, and Li Qing smiled at them. In less than half an hour, the news spread throughout the Hong Kong business circle. Those tycoons who wanted to make a move put away their thoughts. They are also afraid that they will make money but not spend it. Although Li Qing will not make trouble in China, once they do, they can forget about going abroad. As soon as they step out of the country, they will go to see God. Do they know how the rich man Chen Li died? Brother Qing, Hemin came as soon as she received Li Qing's phone call. In fact, Hemin was still quite happy. This time, Li Qing's woman appeared in such an occasion, which also showed her status in Li Qing's mind. Li Qing stood up and hugged Hemin. "Hey, you go and comfort the women of the Huo family on my behalf." Hemin nodded sensibly and walked into the morning hall. The leaders of the major Hong Kong societies who heard the news later also came to the funeral home to burn incense for Mr. Huo. "Mr. Li. Hello, Mr. Li." Almost all the Hong Kong societies now no longer call Li Qing by his name. Li Qing has long transcended his status and has become someone they look up to. Brother Qi, you are here too." Li Qing saw Qi Gang coming with his men, and he hurriedly went to meet him. "Brother Li, we received the news in the early morning and rushed here on a special plane." Qi Gang glanced at the morning hall. "Mr. Huo, you have made so many contributions to the country, we should come to see you off."